I remember seeing a video of the young male, might have been late 20s. He was having a mental health breakdown. The mother called the police to help so that she can get him to the hospital. But because the guy was running with a knife and clearly having an episode, the response by that police officer, he shot him. Shot him like 5-6 times. Man died. I hear both sides of the safety component. I don't want to be stabbed. You coming at me. I don't know what to do. But like, at what point as an officer does it hit you that you're also a human being and this other person is a human being? The officer was on George Floyd's neck. At what point did he pause and go, the hell am I doing? I'm about to kill this man.
Right.
For what? Where is the compromise? Where does it become the police officer, human being? Not just, I'm trained to do this, but where does that human person come in to say, I need to do something different, regardless of your training? Mm-hmm. When does that kick in?
I hear that.
Welcome to The Conversations We Should Be Having, a space where a police officer and an activist talk about race and justice in America in a new way. A way that doesn't shy away from hard truths or differing opinions, and yet strengthens their friendship. No matter how challenging a conversation may be, they commit to staying in the room together. In this episode, Tanisha shares the origins, goals, and clears up misconceptions of the Black Lives Matter movement. As they reach a shared understanding, they broach the question of, where do police and BLM go from here?
So I want to learn about this stuff. BLM, tell me more about that. Let's get to the nitty gritty. Because for me, and probably a lot of people in my line of work, their goal is to hate police and hate us. But I hear you're doing so much more, giving to the community, raising money, Black excellence. I mean, this all sounds amazing. But on the law enforcement side, or whatever you would hear in the media, maybe throws a real negative spin towards it. What is the ultimate goal outside of, all the great things that it sounds you raise money for and do for the community?
I'm going to start and go backwards a little bit.
I'm not a big Twitter user, so when I first used the words Black Lives Matter, it was on Facebook.
So Black Lives Matter started as a slogan. It started as a hashtag. It was not meant to be a slogan, but it was a simple statement of a fact, right? That Black Lives Matter. And that resulted from the things that were happening back in the time, from George Floyd to Ahmaud Arbery to Breonna Taylor, all those things that happened in the past couple of years. That movement of Black Lives Matter, turning it from a hashtag, from a slogan, from a fact to protest to people speaking up. And so that's where it stemmed from. It stemmed from police brutality. It stemmed from police officers killing Black people, or just anybody killing Black people. And these 3 women took that movement that was forming and turned it into a national organization.
This summer, the Black Lives Matter movement took center stage, from global protests to a renamed plaza in Washington, D.C.
And that turned into local community organizations starting their own Black Lives Matter chapters.
One injustice, one place is an injustice in every place.
I think that's where the confusion comes from, is because people get upset about the global Black Lives Matter movement started by the 3 women. But you have these local boots on the ground organizations like BLM Seacoast and BLM Manchester and Nashua that are working really hard in the community, not just to say F the police and abolish the police, but to actually help our people, give back to our people, work with organizations to have seats at the table so that we're represented, to break down these systemic barriers, to say this rule or this policy was created on the backs of Black folks dying, rooted in slavery, and we need to change that because we're no longer in that world. That's really what BLM is about. We're trying to make change. We're trying to tell the world we're tired of fighting this fight. We're tired of having to tell you that we matter, that we are important to society, that you can't just get away with harming us and killing us and there not be a consequence to it. And we're not trying to diminish other people's lives. We're not saying that you don't matter. We're saying right now, Black lives are being harmed so much on a global scale, from physical and emotional and mental, that we need to be a priority.
Do you think protests work? Do you think they're effective?
I do. There's protests and then there's riots. Two totally different things.
Yep.
And I think people have them confused, but they also put them together. Sometimes riots are a result of a protest. When that happens, it misconstrues the message that was trying to be put across. But also I go back to what Martin Luther King said. The riot is the language of the unheard. And so when we see these riots and these protests, we need to stop and say, what the hell caused them to go break a window? What caused them to get this upset that the way that they got our attention was this? I think protests are meant to grab attention, to bring awareness to a situation. They are meant to educate and give people the space to speak, to vent, to share their mindset so that someone else who may not have had that perspective can open their minds.
I hear that. I guess I don't disagree, but where I struggle sometimes, if somebody is going to protest peacefully, there's always going to be somebody that does something to make it seem different.
We know a lot of the protests that happened were not Black Lives Matter people that started the riots. They were other outside organizations doing that, and we got blamed for it. I think protests work. Protests do not work alone. And so I'm all for a good protest, but if someone says that's all we're doing is protesting, I'm going to go, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I come from the mindset of conversations and talking really help, right? And I think that view of mine really increased over the past couple of months from doing Project Empathy and meeting you and stuff like that. I've been on a couple task force with police departments and really working on certain initiatives. So I would love if more police departments or officers came to us and said, how can we work together? Because we would tell you how we can work together is let's look at some of your policies. Let's look at the reasons why you stop people and why it can be decriminalized or changed, because police pull individuals over for some very suspect things, right? And a lot of it is race-based. And we look at the history of why police were started. It started from tracking down slaves and bringing them back to their slave owners. And then once slaves were free, it was tracking down slaves and then killing them.
But is that fair?
It's not.
Because, that wasn't in my mind at all when I wanted to become a police officer. It's not even in my mind now. I'm looking at things through another lens. And I'm not going to say there aren't officers out there, when it sounds so cliche with, there's good and bad, blah, blah, blah. You know what I mean?
Is it fair to say you suck because of the history of your police department? No. But do we have to understand why certain cultures, individuals feel how they feel? Absolutely. So when you think about why police were formed on the backs of killing slaves and that slave history and then the KKK and then all of things that came with that, half police forces were KKK members, all those things that were embedded that aided or added to the killing of Black lives. And then you think about what has happened in inner cities. You can only imagine why we wouldn't have this great positive relationship with the police. And so I think we need to understand it in order to move forward. You got to understand my history and my perspective, my trauma, in order to know how to effectively be empathetic with me.
Yeah. So how do we do that?
That's the question of the century, right?
Probably a lot of difficult conversations.
Yep.
How do we move forward? When I brought our police department to some opportunities to learn more, it was like, how did we get here? And it was more than just George Floyd, right? I mean, and
right.
I think we said it before, like all of a sudden, that was the big turning point for what seems like a huge turn in policing. And I would probably say whether anybody wants to admit it, the entire BLM movement has opened the eyes of a lot of people. So there's some positives out of this, you know.
I mean, there's tons of positives, to be honest with you. Now there's the conversation, not just a surface layer of don't be racist, but more so those policies are horrible.
Philadelphia is now the first major city in the entire country that prevents police from pulling over drivers for minor traffic violations.
Philadelphia became the first big city to ban minor traffic stops that are said to be criminalized driving while black. That's the type of changes that need to happen. Like to say, we are banning these minor traffic stops because your front light was out and that resulted in me pulling your license and then checking your whole history and then go, oh my God, do I smell weed in the car? Like, you know, all those things, or stops that resulted in people getting shot. That's a huge step because you start breaking down systems like that, getting rid of minor traffic stops. Because what was the purpose?
I hear your perspective. And I think, you know, a friend of mine said it. We're like the low-hanging fruit because we're the easiest to attack. We come with our share of mistakes. We're recruit from the human race. By no means am I making an excuse for things that are wrong. When it's wrong, it's wrong. But I can see mistakes being made because in training, you can't duplicate real life and what that kind of emotion and what really is going to happen. And again, I feel like I've said it, you know, over and over, but we're just human.
I mean, I'm there with you on the adrenaline piece in the moment, but I feel like in the position of the police, you don't get to say it was the heat of the moment because you're talking about a life. No, I'm not a police officer, but I would hope, and this is the things that we talk about when we talk about changes in police and all of that and breaking down the system and rebuilding it, which is part of that whole abolishment initiative. I would hope that in your training, you literally get drilled training on de-escalation, on the heat of the moment, on appropriate ways to respond to incidents.
I agree. And you know what? One of the things too is it's you know, the police culture is so heavy on liability. You know, if I don't do this and the person gets caught down the road and I didn't act, there are so many things that go through an officer's mind on any given thing. We have the side of people that say, give them a break. Then you have the side of people that say, we have laws, we have ordinances, I pay you.
Yeah.
And it's like, what? I don't know what to do. Because you arrest somebody, lives on the internet now, and that goes forever. Little Bobby who grows up and gets arrested for an OUI, makes a mistake one night, doesn't mean he's not going to be an outstanding citizen or the next inventor of who knows what. But I do still think it's so much bigger. I think there's so much misunderstanding on both sides of it, but what we agree on, there's another way to deal with this.
And I feel like it's a good way to lead into part 3 of this conversation. So stay tuned for our next episode of Elliot Really Breaking Down. What is it like to be a police officer so that I can truly understand and maybe even bring those conversations back to different tables to say, yes, we want this, but have we thought about that?
Yeah, I'm really excited actually about that. We're trying without kind of a loose roadmap, not knowing where we're going to end up, but I feel like it's a good direction. So that's going to be a good conversation.
And that's how the empathy rolls.
The Conversations We Should Be Having is brought to you by Green Acre Baha'i School. Green Acre is a center of learning in Elliott, Maine, dedicated to promoting the oneness of humanity so that we all may live in a just, diverse, and united society. For new episodes and events, please visit theconversationweshouldbehaving.com. You can find the podcast on any of your favorite listening platforms. Please like, follow, and share.